On the first Monday of January 1966, B. L. Hines entered through the doors of the Miami Herald building, where she was starting her job as a file clerk in the library.
But when I started working there, even in the library, I would come up in the library in the elevator with some of the white men, and they would be knocking each other out the door to get out the elevator door before me. And I would just stand back and say, after you, because they didn't think I was a lady. They didn't think I deserved that honor. And one of them was a columnist. He had been a columnist. He wrote a column on one page, on one side of the comics, and there was another columnist who wrote on the other side of the column. Larry Thompson wrote on one side, and Jake Kofold wrote on another side. Well, Larry was pretty good. He was a nice guy, and he was very kind to me. Kofold didn't like me and made no bones about it. And so one day we were in the elevator together, and again he was rushing to get out the elevator because he don't want me to think he thinks of me as a lady. And you know what I used to make? I still make great pound cakes. And so one day it came to me, okay, I'm gonna bring a couple of slices of pound cake in and give them to different people. And I brought him a slice. From that day on, that was my best friend in the newsday. He got some of that colored pound cake in his gut, and it changed his life. It changed his attitude about me. And I worked 2 years before I started going back to school to Miami-Dade at the urging of my mother and some of my friends. And I started, I was going to become a teacher. And then, but I was taking a writing class, and one of the book editor at the Miami Herald was named Fred Shaw, and he was also the vice president of development at Miami-Dade North Campus. And so he would come in to pick up the books when I would be working sometimes at night, because if I got the classes in the day, my supervisor would let me work at night, and he was really kind to let me do that. So when Fred Shaw would come in and pick up the books, we became friends. And I asked him once, I said, would you read a paper for me? I have to turn this in tomorrow. And he said, okay. And he read it, and then he said, so what are you studying at Miami-Dade? And I said, I'm going to be a teacher. And he said, you need to change your major to journalism. And I said, I laughed. I said, but I'm here at the Herald. They don't have any black reporters. They're not going to hire me. He said, he was so serious. He said, B, listen, things are changing in this country, and you need to be ready for the change. And I took his advice, and I switched my major to journalism. And 4 years later, I became a reporter, and they hired me as a reporter, but they didn't tell me they were hiring me. So I'm off on my day off, and my friend in the library called me, and she said, she was angry, and she says, you didn't tell me you've been promoted. I said, what are you talking about? She said, it's all over the newsroom. You're going to be a reporter. They've hired you as a reporter, and you didn't tell me. And I was the only black in the library, and she was so kind to me and had befriended me when nobody else wanted to be my friend. And she felt betrayed. And I said, Hazel, that's not true. Nobody has called me. I don't know anything about this. So I said, give me Lewis's phone number. That was our supervisor, and he was off the same day. And I called him at home. I said, Lewis, I just want you to know there's no truth to that rumor going around that I'm a reporter. I said, I would have talked to you first about it. He said, B, it's true. I said, what? He said, it's true. He said, don't you remember when I came back from Larry Jenks's office Friday, and I sat down because his desk faced mine, and he said, oh boy, this is more problems. He said it was more problems because I was going to lose my best person in the library. And I nearly dropped the phone. So when my mother came home from work, I said, Mama, guess what? And I told her the story, and she was so shocked. So I said, we aren't going to tell anybody. We're just going to pray about it. I'm going in tomorrow, and which was Tuesday, and I'm going to see the managing editor. Name is Larry Jenks, who's still alive. He's about 90 or 91 now. He lives in California. And his wife and I, once in a while, we correspond on Facebook. And his daughter sent, whenever I mention him in my column, and I have, his daughter sends him the columns so he could read them. And so the that Tuesday I went in, and Larry Jenks welcomed me, and he said, well, Juanita Green was a colleague. She was a reporter at the Miami Herald, and Helen Gorham was the assistant editor in the women's department. Helen and I were the same age, and they befriended me. They knew I was going to school, and I was writing for the campus paper, and they took some of my articles to Larry Jenks. That's how he knew I could write. And he told me that what they had done, and they were so kind and so helpful. And so he said, we're going to give you a chance. You're going to have a 3 months trial basis, and we're going to give you a $10 raise. And at that time, I was making $110. I had been raised to $110 in the library, and I was going to be making now $120. And I'm thinking, shucks, I would take it for nothing because I just wanted the opportunity to show them that I could do this. Well, I was going to start writing in 2 weeks. He was going to get the newsroom ready for my arrival. At that time, the newsroom didn't have many women, period. And here I am, a black woman. I'm black and I'm a woman, and I'm coming to this mostly all male domain, and they don't really want me there. So he kind of had to prep them for it, for my coming. And so, don't you know that the night before the Monday night, I'm supposed to start the next night. This was the 15th. I was supposed to start the 16th. 1970, a riot broke out in Liberty City. I don't know anything about this riot. The next morning, I'm dressed up in my Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, and I got my white high heel shoes on and my bright yellow dress, and I'm headed to be Brenda Starr, the reporter. I get in the newsroom, and Larry meets me in the newsroom. He says, are you afraid to cover the riot in Liberty City? He said, did you know there's a riot? I said, I live in Liberty City. I didn't know anything about it, but it was west of where I lived, closer to the Brownsville area. So that's why I didn't know anything about it. And I said, no. And in my mind, I'm saying, is Brer Rabbit scared of the briar patch? Because, you know, Brer Rabbit lived in the briar patch, and so he would always get the fox to throw him in there when he got into trouble with the fox. So I went out that day. I didn't have credentials. I didn't have a press card. I didn't have anything to prove that I was a reporter. So I took Larry's phone number in my notebook, and the cops didn't want anybody on the street at that time. And so I'm walking down 62nd, and then I got to go up to the cops' car because they're standing on the outside or sitting in the car. And I give them this paper with Larry Jenks' phone number on it. And I introduce myself as a reporter that I'm covering the riot. I wasn't the only one, of course. They had white reporters out there too, but at that time, there weren't that many white people covering in the black community because it was a dangerous time. So I would do that, and then I was passing one storefront, and there were 2 men standing in the doorway, and I heard one of them say, man, this riot is killing my business. So I backed up, and I wanted to know what his business was, and I introduced myself, and I told him I was a reporter. He says, I'm a hustler. He thought that was going to make me shrink, I guess. And I said, oh, tell me more about it. And he had women on the street. That was his job. And I had no better sense than to write a story. And I went back to the office, and I told him, I think I got a little story for you. This man said the riot was hurting his business. And when they read it, they were cracking up. And they put it on the front page. It was just a little short story. I didn't even know the deadlines. I just went back to the office, and they gave me a desk and a typewriter, and it was a manual typewriter. Then we didn't have computers or even electric typewriters. This is 1970. And I wrote my little story out, and they put it on the front page. It was my very first story for the Miami Herald. And so much has gone on since then. I went on to cover the riot. They didn't want any reporters in the meetings, the people who were trying to settle the dispute. And so, because I was so unknown and I was black, I got into the meetings, and I had to memorize everything I memorized names and events and times and places. And then I went back to the Herald and I had dictated my story to somebody else because I didn't want my name on it right then, because then I figured somebody might put two and two together. I lived in Liberty City and they would know who I was. And so the first story that I wrote, I had dictated it to one of the editors. His name was Sam Jacobs. And when I went back, when I heard this guy say to another guy, "Man, we had a spy in here yesterday. Did you see that story in the Miami Herald? It was word for word what we were talking about." And I wanted to say that was me, but I couldn't blow my cover. But that went on for a while until somebody else blew my cover. But by that time, things had settled and it was okay. And after that went on for about 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And now this is not nearly the end of my 3 months trial period. This is just like 3 weeks I'm writing. And I'll never forget, Larry Jenks came to meet me in the newsroom one morning when I came, and he said, "B, if you want this job, it's yours." He said, "Forget the 3 months trial basis." And that's how I got my start at the Miami Herald as a reporter. But when I first started as a reporter, and I told you the guys didn't really want me there, here I am, I'm a woman. First of all, I'm a woman, and then I'm black, and then I'm green. I'm new. And so they don't know what to do with me. So they would send me on wild goose chases. One time they sent me to cover something at the dump. I did not know it was a dump, but when I got there, the address was the dump, the county dump on 47th Avenue. And back then, it was an ugly place, full of black dirt and with vultures flying overhead and everything. And I think, oh no, they pulled one on me. But I said to myself, okay, if I don't go in and pretend that I don't know that it's a joke they're pulling on me, I said, they're going to say that I don't want to follow instructions, okay? So what I did was I had my car was a year old, about 2 years old at that time, and it was a Biscayne Chevrolet, the Biscayne model of the Chevrolet. That was the huge car, and it had the air was broke. So it's in the middle of the summer, and I'm riding through the dump, asking God not to let me sink down in all that dirt, because I said they'll never find me. So I followed the road that the trucks would go up to dump the stuff, and then I turned around and I came back, and I was really upset. But I said, okay, I could either walk in and be the mad black woman, or I can go in and pretend that I don't know they did this on purpose. And I chose the latter. I decided I would pretend that I didn't know that they did this on purpose. And so I went in and I said, okay, that was a wrong address. Somebody made a mistake on the address. I said, and they couldn't even look at me. The guys on the desk, whoever assigned it to me, couldn't look at me. They just, okay, B, we'll find something else for you to do. And I went back to my desk. But I knew, but what happened, the reason I felt so calm when I got into the building, I got a gospel song and I sang it all the way back downtown. I just had to get myself in the right mood to face these people who don't want me there. And finally, after a few more incidents like that, I went to the managing editor and I said to him, listen, these guys are playing games with me. I said, I'm a mother. At that time, I'm 32 years old. And I said, I have 2 children. I'm a widow. And I need this job. And I said, they're sending me on wild goose chases where there's no story. I need you. I said, we need to do something about this. So Steve Rogers, bless his heart, I don't even know if he's still alive, he said to me, B, what do you want to do? I said, well, you have never done a good job. This paper has never done a good, honest job of covering the black community. I said, let me tell our stories. Let me introduce us to this community. And he said, okay, that's a good idea. And that was one of the reasons I got to do the Good Bread Alley story. And all the story on 2nd Avenue, I wrote about the Strip. Until then, people didn't know our story. The white people, we knew our stories, but the white people did not know the stories and what Overtown meant to us. And I talked about how the Overtown was nearly destroyed when they built I-95, and it tore up the community. And so those stories nobody else had ever written. So I was able to tell our stories to the community, and then I let them know that we don't only have babies, we actually fall in love, and we get married, and we have weddings, we have debutante balls, we do all the things, we have our own community, and we love each other. We really love. It's not a sex thing, but we fall in love and we get married. The person who was the musician when we graduated, his name was Charles Mobley, and Charles later on started the first at Liberty City Elementary. He was teaching little black ghetto children how to play the violin, and I did a story on him that ran in the Miami Herald. And so they knew our stories because I was able to tell them, and it shed a different light. Then after I got the job permanently, they put me on the school beat. There was another man who, his name was Heath Merriweather, who later became the managing editor for the paper. But we covered the school beat. He covered the business end, and I covered the schools. And I went every day to a different school, and I wrote about what was going on, how they were teaching the children, what our children were learning. And then one time I suggested, when school started, again, this was the summer, and school was beginning to start, and I asked them if I could cover one classroom for the whole year and just let parents know what their children were being taught. And I did that for the entire year, for the entire school year. And when the Dade County School Board, school teachers, when I believe it's the Florida, the Association of School Teachers, I don't know the real name of it, but that's when I got my first award because because of the stories that I wrote, telling parents what their children were learning in school. I got the School Bell Award. And I didn't know I was getting it. I was covering the convention, and then they called my name up to the stage and presented the award to me. And I was just floored because I had no idea. And so when I came back to the office, I showed them. I said, "This is what I got." I didn't know that was my first award. I didn't even know whether I was supposed to show it to them. And they were so surprised and proud of me. It was my very first award that I received. After then, they moved me from the newsroom to the features department. By now, it's now the Living Today section. And so I covered features. But before I left the newsroom, I covered all kind of stuff. I also used to write memos all the time to the managing editor, to the publisher, to whoever I could write it to when I saw something that was wrong in the paper. First of all, when I started writing, they were calling white people Mrs. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, and black women were called by their first names. They stopped that because I told them it was not fair. You know, we are women. We knew that the Cuban people were going to be accepted here. They came, and many of them said that they were rich when they were in Cuba, and they left everything to come here. That was not always the case. We learned that not everybody who came from Cuba was rich. The way it affected the black community, I had a friend, her family is still I'm still close to the family, but their father worked as a bellhop at one of the finest hotels in Miami Beach. And he sent his children to college, bought a house, and sent his children to college from that job. But when Cubans came over, all those jobs that black men used to have that was sort of made us a middle class community were taken away. And they were replaced by Cubans who took the jobs for less money that the black people were being paid. And then when they got their position, then they had a cousin who could do this that a black person was doing. And so before you knew it, black people are out. You don't have jobs in the big hotels anymore. My mother used to be a maid at one of the hotels on Miami Beach, and she was put out. because somebody else who could speak Spanish would work for less than what she was being paid. And so that pitted the black community against the Cuban community, and it really wasn't our fault. It really wasn't our fault. There was room for all of us to get jobs, but what they did was they put us out and they brought Cubans in. And then one of the things that happened while I was working in my early days at the Miami Herald, they did a big section on how far the Cubans had come in 10 years. And they were throwing, and the stories threw stones at the black community like we hadn't done anything in all the years that we had been here. And I was so taken back about that that I wrote a memo, and I said, you know, it was so unfair because the Cubans came and they were given help. Black people never got any help. If we tried to have something, like for instance, look at what happened in Rosewood, where people had their own properties and black people had their own little community. Look what happened in Tulsa. If we even tried to have our own stuff, it was burned to the ground. It was torched. We were torched. But Cubans got money to live. They got business loans to start businesses. They started restaurants and houses and stuff. We couldn't do that. We were not allowed. We were not given licenses. So I don't think, and I told them, I said this story, it just slaps the black community in the face. Because I wasn't the only one who felt that way. That was sad. When that happened, I was having some work done on my house. The guy who was working on my house called me. It was a Saturday. B, he called them the N-words. He said they're tearing up. He said the verdict just came in, and he said everybody's headed down to the Civic Center. They're going to tear up everything. And sure enough, that's how the riots started. Everybody, when the verdict came in, I remember answering the phone by my back door because it was on the wall by the back door when he called me to tell me that the riot was going on. And he said people are coming down to the Civic Center by the hundreds. He said there's going to be trouble, and there was trouble. I covered it with a team of reporters. I was on the street, and what I did was I would call back in my information, and it was like somebody was back there writing, and it was incorporated into like the story that they were writing. I happened to be writing, calling my information in to a person who rarely, I think my name maybe have been on one story, and I walked those streets, but she never put my name on the, other report. This story was also reported by such and such a person and such, but my name was left out. So, but and I'd like to tell you that was a black reporter who was doing that. And sometimes we are our own worst enemies, Sure. That happens sometimes. When Haitians came, I never forget, I thought I was going to lose my job because I was one of those protesting I had my big umbrella. I remember the day that we marched from down Flagler Street, and my son was in college at the time, my younger son, and we marched together, and I said, I could lose my job if they know that I'm doing this because I'm supposed to be like on nobody's side. But I had to stand up. That was one day I said, well, if I lose my job, I just lose my job. These are my black people. They're not treating them right. They're coming over here. They're sending them back. They're not doing the right thing by them. And I just had to stand up. I just had to walk. I had to march. And I remember when we got to the courthouse, I stood on the porch of the courthouse, and as far as I could see, there were black people coming around the corner down Flagler Street. But when the story came out the next day, they said it was about 250 or 300 people marching. And I said, that is such a lie. I was there. I saw the people turning the corner, a mass of black people and white people and some Cuban people marching down Flagler Street on behalf of the Haitian people. must have been around 1981, 82, somewhere around there. There was a time when, one time when a family, a mother with her 5 children were coming over. They were being smuggled to Miami. And the guy who was bringing them, when the Coast Guard got after him, he threw them over, made them jump overboard. This mother and her 5 children drowned. So I was sent out to, at this time I'm going through all kind of hateful stuff at the Herald. And the editor said to me, I want you to cover the family of this woman who died in the ocean with her 5 children. And you better do a good story because you know such and such a person is writing and you know her story is, she's going to cover the funeral and you know her story is going to be good. You know, stuff like that I had to face. So I went out and I interviewed the family and I wrote a beautiful story. But while I was out, I got a call from, before I left the building, I got a call from the late Bernard Portier, who told me that the little girls needed dresses to be buried in. While I was out, I went shopping for those little girls. I bought everything from their underpanties to their hair bows to the little lace socks, and I bought the prettiest little dresses that I could find. And I paid for it out of my own salary. I think I used the light bill money, something anyway. But I was happy to do it, and I took them to Bernard, and he said, "Well, B, they need little gloves." And at that time, people were not wearing gloves anymore. But I remember that Sears had a Girl Scout department, and they sold white gloves with the Girl Scout uniform. So I went there and I bought gloves for the children, and I took them back to the funeral home, and then I came back and I wrote my story. I got so many compliments off that story. People cried when they read it. But the next day I came into the office. The story ran on a Saturday. I came into the office and there was the person who was going to cover the funeral. And one of our Pulitzer Prize winning reporters was coaching her on what to say and how to write it. And then I heard him ask her, and what were the children wearing? And she hadn't done her homework. She didn't even go to see the children. She didn't view the bodies, so she didn't know. And I'm listening to this conversation. Well, what did the little girls wear, don't you know? And I said, they wore the prettiest little blue dresses. I just piped up and said, because they were sitting a few desks from me. I said, they wore the prettiest little dresses, and they got white Girl Scout gloves on and socks with lace and pretty little hair bows. And the guy said, how do you know that, B? I said, because I bought them. And he was so shocked. You know, years later, here not long ago, Jacqueline Charles, who was not a writer at the time, who was still in high school, wrote a story, and somebody told her that this woman who worked at Channel 10 bought the little girl's clothes. She was an anchor woman for Channel 10. Like Ann Bishop bought the clothes for the little girls. So Jackie was doing, I called her and told her, I said, Jackie, I know you didn't know because you were not, I said, I bought those clothes. And one of our reporters, he was our first black columnist, his name was Francis Ward. And when he found out that I had bought these clothes, he gave me $50 out of his pocket because he knew I had 2 children and that I had a house and bills. He said, B, let me give you this toward what you spent. And I told Jackie that, and she said, "Oh, B, I'm so sorry." She said, "I got that story from Bernard Portier's son." I said, "Well, he was so little, he don't know what happened. I don't blame him." So Jackie did a community chat not long after then at the African American Cultural Arts Center in Liberty City on 62nd Street, which is now renamed for Dr. Marshall Davis Sr. And and then she set the record straight. She talked about that, and she said, and I would like for everybody to know that I said in the story that Ann Bishop bought the little girl's clothes, but it was actually B. Hines who did that. So, but you know, it wasn't in the paper, so not too many people really still know that they think Ann Bishop. And I liked Ann, and I'm sure she probably contributed something, but she did not buy those clothes. I bought them. But it wasn't easy when I was being uh, picked on, and I pretended I didn't know that they were doing it. Uh, I would find ways to get back without getting back, without talking back, without being disrespectful. For instance, I had an editor one time. Back then, we used to dress up to go to work. You wore stockings and shoes and nice clothes. And I was a seamstress, so I made most of my clothes. And one day, everybody in the department looked nice. One day, the editor called me aside and wanted to know how could I afford to dress the way I dress. And I was taken back, and I said, "Excuse me?" And then I'm thinking, well, am I making that much less than anybody else in the department that she's got to ask me how can I afford to dress the way I dress? And I said, well, first of all, I know how to shop. I go to the good stores and I find things on the sale rack. And I said, and the other part is that I know how to sew and I make most of my clothes. And she was so shocked. But when I told my friend who had helped me get the job, Juanita Green, I told her what she said, and she said, "Oh no." She said the two of them had identical blazers. At that time, the velvet blazers were popular. She had a brown, and Juanita had a brown one, and she had a burgundy, the same blazers. So Juanita said to me, "Tomorrow, wear a skirt and a blouse to match my brown blazer and get here early." And I did. And I put her blazer on, and when my editor walked in and saw me with that brown blazer on, like her burgundy blazer, she was so angry. Oh my goodness, she couldn't look at me the whole day. But Juanita and I would pass each other in the corridor, and we would just crack up. And so I found ways to get past all that hatred and make it humorous. And that was one of the ways that we did it. Another way it was when when she became the editor of the department, she took everybody to lunch to find out where they were, and told them what she expected of them. And when she got to my desk, she turned around and walked away. And yet she would say that I was not turning in copy. Well, when I would turn in a story, she would redline it like it was so bad and give it back to me, or she wouldn't run it at all. And then she was telling the editor, the managing editor, that I was falling down on the job, so to speak. And so when Juanita, who was friends with the managing editor, told me, I said, whatever I give to her, if I give her a list of ideas, she would tell me that somebody had that idea first. If I give her a story, she wouldn't even read it before she redlined it and say, you didn't do this, or you didn't ask this question, or you didn't do that. And if she had read the story, she would have seen that everything was covered. And so I said to her one day when she told me we were getting raises, it was raise time. And I always got a merit raise because of my work. And this particular time, she took me into the cafeteria to talk. And she said, well, I'm going to give you the raise this time, but if you don't come up, you won't have a job. And I said, wait, hold it. I said, don't give me the raise. And she looked at me so funny. I said, no. I said, I've been a reporter for almost 10 years, and I've been to this company with this company for 14 years. I said, and I've always gotten merit raises because my work was good. And I said, but if you don't think I'm good enough, then you wait until I come up to your standards, and then you give me the raise. And she was so shocked, the color drained from her face. And she said, well, I said, no, keep the raise now. Don't give it to me right now. And I said, besides, I don't know what you expect of me. I said, you took everybody to lunch. You told them what you wanted for them, expected of them. When you got to my desk, you turned around, and I felt discriminated against. Wrong word, Hines. Don't say discriminated. She was so nervous. She said, are you calling me a racist? I said, no. I said you discriminated against me. Same difference, but anyway. So she says, well, what do you want? Do you want to go to lunch? We can go to lunch and we can talk. I said, well, it's up to you. You're the editor. Whatever day you want to take me, that's fine. So when she said, okay, what about next Wednesday? I said, okay, good. So my desk mate was a woman named Eleanor Hart, who was sweet as a button. She was so sweet. She used to write a column in the Herald called A Column with a Heart. And we were desk mates. It was like an Ann Landers column. And I said, well, I'm going to lunch with her next week, but I'm going to bring my own lunch. And she said, why? She said, she's going to take you to lunch. I said, listen, she's not going to take me out to a nice restaurant like she took you. She's going to take me to the cafeteria. And I said, I'm going to bring my own sandwich. So she said, she didn't believe me. So comes Wednesday, I bring my sandwich in, and I had cookies that I had made for my children, and I brought some cookies, and She said, "Are you ready to go downstairs?" The luncheon room was on the third floor. And I said, "Yeah, let me get my lunch." And she says, "Oh, no, it's on the Herald." I said, "Well, when I eat in the Herald cafeteria, I bring my own lunch because I don't like the food there." She was so shocked. Eleanor was trying to stifle a laugh. And she says, "Well, save your lunch and have it for later. We'll go. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go to Arthur's was a nice restaurant on Biscayne Boulevard?" I said, "Wherever you want to go, I'll go." So I left my lunch. When we came back, she was so nervous. She never told me to the day she died what she expected of me. What she told me was how mean her mother was to her. I knew her whole story. But she never said, "This is what I expect of you." She was so nervous and she was trying to get on my good side. So when we got back to the office, Eleanor said, "So what happened?" I said, "Well, I still don't know what she expects of me, but I know that her mother didn't like her." And she said, and I said she couldn't eat her. She ordered a salad and she couldn't even eat it because she was so nervous. So I said, "We'll have my sandwich at on our break." And she said, "B, how did you know she was going to do that?" And I said, "My pastor always told us, know God and be acquainted with Satan." And I thought she would fall out laughing. I said, "I knew she was not, I knew her. I got to know her. So I knew she wasn't going to treat me the way she treated you because she doesn't see me as an equal. So I had to be prepared." So those are the kinds of things that I did to get over and to maneuver my way through years of hatred. But it wasn't all hate. There were so many people there who loved me and who were in my corner and who wanted me to succeed. And I was doing very well. But you know what I did? I prayed and asked God to promote her because I was so tired. And God did that. He promoted her all the way to Boulder, Colorado, where she stayed for 4 years. And while she was out there, my career started to soar. I became the first black columnist, woman columnist. Um, I had my own column that ran on the front page of the local section. And it stayed there until she came back. And then she picked up her campaign, her Hate B. Hines campaign, and all but fired me. But during the time she was hating on me so, Miami-Dade Community College asked me to be their commencement speaker. I was the first black person from the Miami Herald. I don't think anybody else from the Miami Herald was asked at that time to be a commencement speaker. And my editor at the time was so happy and so proud of me because she had told me, she said, "B, she's trying to get rid of you, but we're not gonna let that happen. You're going to give us so much copy that they won't even be able to use it." And it was true. I worked so hard. Suzanne Levinson, I will never forget her. She was so wonderful. And when I told her that I had been selected to be the commencement speaker at Miami-Dade, she said, "Oh my goodness, that's such an honor." She said, "And you're going to write your speech and we'll run it the day after the graduation." I didn't know what I was going to say. She said, "You're going to write it. Sit down and write your speech." Dr. Marvin Dunn's brother was a professor there, and he presented me with an award when I gave the speech that day. And so I talked about my background and how far I had come, and they loved it. And she ran the article, the column. She ran it as a column the following, I think it was either that Sunday or Monday in the paper. But the people who hated me so and who was hating on me never said congratulations, never said we're so proud of you, you bring honor to the Miami Herald. They never said anything like that. But it was okay because I knew that I knew that I had brought honor to the Miami Herald. I made them look good. And so, there were a lot of things that I did, and I believe I give the glory and the honor to the Lord because I wouldn't have known how to do this.